Talo Falava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suswiki. Coming up.
He is weak, and that has been, again, public discussion. He's a weak leader.
We take a look at who could possibly be Tonga's next Prime Minister. Also, a Pacific Regional Free Trade and Partnership Agreement turns 5, and cultural obligations could be leading to frequent burnout symptoms among Pacific people. It's been almost 2 weeks since Tonga held its general election, and the country is yet to find out who their Prime Minister will be. I spoke to our Tongan correspondent, Galafi Moala, and began by asking him, when will Tonga have a Prime Minister?
They should have one by either the end of the week or first thing next week.
Obviously, the public don't get to have a say in who will lead their country, but have you heard or read anything about who they think will get the top job? Do they want to see a Noble back in that seat?
Well, what is happening is there has not been any formal announcements of who are the candidates for Prime Minister. But because of public discussions, it seems to be 4 people are coming up to the front that are possible candidates for Prime Minister. And obviously the current Prime Minister, Dr. Aisake is the front runner in that as a candidate. And then his deputy, Fusimalohi, is also a candidate. And then, of course, the former Prime Minister of the previous government is also a candidate. So you've got 3 from the people's representatives who are candidates. And then, of course, there is a noble who declared even before the election that if the chance came up, he would stand as a candidate. And that's Lord Whakawhanua, who is the current Speaker of the House. So those are the 4 names that are being discussed publicly as candidates for Prime Ministership.
Why is Dr. Aisake Eke considered to be the frontrunner for Prime Minister when he's only been in that role for a short while?
That's correct. That's a good question, because what it is that if you are the current Prime Minister, you can automatically, you've got to have something huge that you have done that makes you have to vote you out. So that's why I'm saying he's a front runner. He's not necessarily the most popular in terms of in Parliament, but because he's the current Prime Minister, he definitely becomes the one that's solidly in the front for Prime Minister. Yeah.
How would you describe his leadership style?
Well, he is weak, and that has been, again, public discussion. He's a weak leader. He may be a good man, but he's a weak leader in the sense that he hasn't been able to bring his cabinet together. There's been a lot of friction and tension among his cabinet ministers. One of the ministers, for example, interrupted with a process in which he allowed a person that was banned from traveling to leave the airport and traveled overseas. And that's a huge violation of law. And so the Prime Minister, this is one of his ministers, the Prime Minister didn't say anything publicly on that. And still there hasn't been any discipline exercised. The other thing is one of his ministers had a fist fight in Parliament.
That's right.
And again, there's no discipline. He's still a part of the cabinet. So he has been viewed as a weak leader, unable to really bring things together. But because he's a good man, he's a fairly quiet man, and his side or his supporters really are pushing him to become the Prime Minister again.
Who would you say then is a strong contender to be Prime Minister out of the people's representatives?
Well, I would say it would have to be the previous Prime Minister, Siausi Sovaleni. But because of the kind of things that are happening among the people's representatives, this is the opportunity for a noble to come forward and say, well, I'll be the alternative to try to bring peace between both sides. And that's why Lord Whakawhanua, who is the current speaker, is a very strong runner for prime ministership, you know. Yeah. And that's the reason he's putting himself forward is because the people's representatives, it's such a conflict with each other. They won't be able to make up their mind. They'll need the nobles' support for the election of a prime minister.
Do you think?
So it's very, very possible that this noble will become prime minister.
Do you think, though, that Lord Whakawhanua has the qualities, the leadership qualities, to be Tonga's prime minister?
Definitely, when you compare it with all the other candidates, the reason being, Susanna, is because he has been the Speaker of Parliament for a number of years, and he has done a very good job of being able to control Parliament, being sure that the key issues are being debated and brought into Parliament. He's been able to keep a very good hand on discipline of Parliament. So he's shown good leadership in relation to Parliament, and compared with all the others, I'm sure he'll make a good one. He has also a legal background, so he understands law. And the other thing too, he's young. He's one of the Tonga's young emerging leaders.
What about his engagement with the community? How do the public perceive him?
Well, he's a Whakawhanua, who is a representative from one of the main towns of Nuku'alofa, Maufanga, as well as from Ha'apai. He's got estate in Ha'apai. So he's in Parliament because of his Ha'apai representation. But the public are pretty, other than the fact that he's a noble, he's in a different category. I think he's got public goodwill toward him as a young leader, and that he'll be supported. The other issue that is to me a major thing, as we're facing this election of prime minister, we are at the situation in Tonga where the progress of our democracy has got to involve everyone. And I mean the royal family, the king, the monarch, the nobility, and the people. It's not an issue of just having the people. Our whole structure, social structure in Tonga is royal family, nobility, and the people. And so to have a noble come in at this time may help us bring together all these entities to be able to walk together. The future of our democracy in Tonga will involve the cooperation and the working together of all these three identities of the monarch, nobility, and the commoners.
Members of the PACER Plus Trade and Development Agreement have concluded an annual meeting in the Solomon Islands. It's a chance for smaller Pacific Island nations to air their hopes and concerns to their developed partners, Australia and New Zealand. Kaya Selby has more.
The long-sought-after agreement has turned 5 years old. It commits its 10 members to reducing tariffs and trade restrictions over the next 2 decades, all the while guaranteeing foreign investment from Australia and New Zealand. Solomon Islands Prime Minister Jeremiah Manele had nothing but good things to say about it in its opening address.
It brings together liberalised trade and targeted development cooperation, enabling our region to improve trade readiness, navigate global trade tensions, and sustain economic growth.
Front of mind for Pacific Island leaders was labour mobility. Migrant worker schemes in Australia and New Zealand may be upskilling workers, but with labour leaving their shores, some say it could be increasing their reliance on remittances.
We recognise the challenges, which includes worker welfare, compliance, and capacity. But together we can resolve them. With more than 30,000 Pacific workers now engaged in Australia and New Zealand, we know the systems are delivering.
Australia and New Zealand have jointly committed around $20 million extra to the agreement that will mostly go towards foreign investment and commercial activities. The deal included provisions to increase that funding over the next 3 to 4 years, should the need arise. Committee Chair Colin Beck says that more than 75% of investment funding over the last 5 years has been used.
With that sort of delivery, I think by this year the percentage would have increased. But it is a positive story. Let us try to keep this momentum going.
Minister of Commerce Scott Simpson, representing New Zealand, says that the funding increase reflects their commitment to the deal's success.
Those Pacific nations that are trading directly with Australia and New Zealand are benefiting in a tangible, real way that boosts those local economies, and I think that's a good thing.
The minister said that if PACER Plus could get more members, the deal would get more funding.
If that occurred and we were able to have some more member nations joining the agreement, then that funding would increase in relative terms as well.
But not every Pacific Island nation is convinced. Papua New Guinea, for example, are on record saying they have no interest whatsoever in the agreement. Fiji were also invited to the meeting, but they had, quote, other prior commitments and priorities.
The sense I got from talking to colleagues around the table was that they would be very welcome to join should they wish to. The more countries that are included in arrangements of this sort, the better for both participating nations, both importers and exporters.
But if Fiji agrees with the minister, they're clearly looking in a different direction. China has reportedly signed an economic framework agreement of their own, with Fiji, Nauru, the Federated States of Micronesia, Vanuatu and Kiribati as signatories. The latter are PACER Plus members. The details are scarce, but Chinese media outlets say it covers goods, services, investment, rules and practical cooperation. Whether China are competing for these nations' trade preference or whether member nations have asked for more, Scott Simpson would not say, but he wouldn't rule anything out.
Those matters, even though they weren't part of the formal agenda, certainly they would have been in the minds of members as we met in Solomon Islands last week. Any further development or changes would be a matter for each nation to consider in due course.
The PACER Plus agreement, signed over the weekend, will be released in due course.
A New Zealand-born Pacifica struggling under the weight of cultural expectations. A new study reveals an alarming prevalence of burnout among New Zealand-born Pacific peoples, highlighting urgent cultural and structural challenges impacting well-being. I spoke to the University of Auckland PhD student, Asitoa Sambilisi, who led the study.
Talofa Sana. Thank you for the question and thank you for the invite to share. This is part of a doctoral research project. And it's been going for the better part of about 2 years. The current findings that we've released out as part of a survey that was released, and we collected data from 1,092 New Zealand-born Pacific people in the months of December 2023, January and February in 2024.
Wow, that's a lot of participants. And what were some of the key findings from that survey?
One key thing was that despite some of the sort of social and cultural, perhaps not unawareness, but just some of the social norms around resiliency and just getting on with things, is that sometimes we belittle some things like mental health or burnout as not sort of real, phenomenal things that don't affect us. And so overwhelmingly percent people in this survey show that burnout is real. Burnout does affect us, and whilst serving and tautua, generosity, all these things are part of our superhero strength in terms of loving our families, loving our communities, burnout is real. And it affects us, and we need to find ways to pause, reflect, and how can we perhaps amend, edit some of the ways in which we practice some of these values. I guess some of the key things that highlight some of our burnout experiences is things around giving our best to others, loving others, but also loving ourselves. But also that's quite tricky for many of us, culturally, and even sort of these social norms. But overwhelmingly, we see in the data is that personal boundaries are really important. And we need to find time and place to talk about these things and implement it.
Right. Because this idea of tautua is so ingrained in Pacific cultures, would you say that Pacific people experience burnout frequently more than their non-Pacific counterparts?
Yeah, I would say so. The data suggests that. We're naturally inclined to sacrifice our personal needs. We're naturally inclined to go over and beyond for others. These things in itself are not bad things. But I guess sometimes the continuous nature around these things and little times to replenish our resources, be it our own health and well-being or our time or our money, these sort of things, it can be quite unsustainable. And as a result of that, we shoulder the stress on our bodies and our minds and our mental health and well-being. And so the data does suggest that the way in which we see the world, the way in which we operate, perhaps, in terms of selflessness and sacrifice, it does lead us to some of these challenging life experiences.
Yeah. I understand you held some workshops to Talanoa about burnout. What were some of the solutions, or what were some of the standout talking points that came from the participants when it came to cultural obligations?
Overwhelmingly, our people understand that our obligations they're important. We can't necessarily run away from these things. It plays a big part in our communities and keeping families together. But people just talked about, I guess, sustainable ways to approaching that, be it if it's our money, then if we know that there are financial obligations coming up, rather than relying on quick access to funds and the incredible stress that comes from that, how do we build into better practices, particularly around saving? And then if we consider sort of various responsibility loads that we have, some of us are incredibly busy at work, home, church, in so many settings. How is it that we can lessen the load sometimes? Sometimes it does mean saying no, or if we reframed it, sometimes it's about saying yes to less things. And it's different seasons for, I guess, various kaupapa or activities that we love doing, and it gives us purpose. But there's only so much time in the day. And so we have to shift accordingly sometimes these responsibilities just to ensure that we can give, but also we have enough time to refill. And then as we have time to refill, we can go back out again.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. For myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā, soifua.